The stars above Varkos burned a cold, impassive silver, light that had traveled for centuries to witness a single moment of arrogance. Admiral Tkor Vale stood at the center of the Vethari Dominion's flagship Ardent Spear, his silhouette framed by the glow of a dying human colony far below. The bombardment was almost poetic in its efficiency, one pulse of plasma for every square kilometer, methodically erasing all trace of habitation. The Admiral's expression didn't shift. To him, it was little more than another correction in the grand order of the galaxy. Human colonies multiply faster than protocol allows, Tkor said, his voice a smooth, metallic rumble that carried authority without heat. They expand, talk, negotiate, and forget their place. Now they will remember. A low murmur of agreement swept through the bridge crew. Around him, the Vethari officers, slender, angular beings with mirrored skin and dark, fluid eyes, moved with machine-like precision. The smell of ionized air and burnt ozone filled the command deck, blending with the faint thrum of the ship's reactors. To most of the Dominion, humanity was a novelty, a young, stubborn species obsessed with diplomacy. Their withdrawal from the galactic talks 3 months ago had been treated as little more than a tantrum. The Council had laughed at their silence, convinced it was a sign of retreat. But even now, as he watched the surface burn, something about that silence gnawed at Tkor's instincts. "Admiral," said a younger officer, his tone cautious. "Lieutenant Serral, newly transferred from a research vessel. Reports confirm total destruction of Erebus 9. No human distress signals detected. No survivors, no resistance." Tkor turned, studying the young lieutenant. "Efficient, wouldn't you agree?" Serral hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the planetary firestorm. "Yes, sir. Efficient. But, if I may, these worlds feel abandoned, as if they knew we were coming." Tkor allowed himself a thin smile, the kind that barely reached his eyes. "They always know. They always run. It's their way." He turned back to the viewport, watching molten rivers carve new scars across the planet's crust. In truth, he didn't believe his own words. The humans didn't run. They negotiated, bartered, pleaded, threatened, but they didn't vanish. Their silence now felt deliberate, like the calm between inhalations before a shout. Moments later, a signal officer approached, his hands trembling slightly as he extended a data slate. "Transmission received from the outer Sol perimeter, Admiral. We detected human technology, an array, unregistered. Coordinates logged near their home system." The command deck stirred. A human installation near Sol was unusual. No Dominion fleet had ventured that close since the ceasefire accords. Kor's eyes narrowed. "Show me." A holographic projection flickered into life, a skeletal communications array orbiting a small moon beyond Neptune's shadow. It looked derelict, lifeless. No defense signatures, no power readings. "A relic," one officer muttered. "They probably forgot it existed." Tkor studied the data in silence. The image was too neat, too convenient. The humans had a reputation for misdirection, for setting traps wrapped in helplessness. But his orders were clear: dismantle all remaining human infrastructure beyond treaty limits. He straightened his posture and spoke with cold finality. "Dispatch a strike team. We'll end this farce." Serral's voice cut softly through the hum of the bridge. "Admiral, what if it's a provocation? They've been silent for months. Perhaps they—" Tkor didn't let him finish. "Perhaps they are cowards who finally learned their place. We are not here to interpret fear, Lieutenant. We are here to enforce peace." The command was issued, and the Ardent Spear shifted course. The stars stretched into long, thin threads as the ship jumped toward Sol's frontier. When the strike group arrived, they found the array exactly as the scans had shown: silent, hollow, surrounded by the wreckage of old satellites. The moon's surface was pitted and barren, untouched for decades. It was by all appearances nothing. The bombardment lasted 30 seconds. The array disintegrated in a silent blossom of blue flame, its fragments scattering into the void. Sensors confirmed no energy signatures, no transmissions. The mission, by all measures, was flawless. But as the debris cooled, a faint pulse rippled through the void, an invisible vibration that skipped across systems faster than any known transmission speed. Instruments registered it as background noise. No one paid attention. Then, through the comms channel, a voice. Human. Flat. Cold. Message received. The bridge went silent. Static filled the line, followed by complete silence. Tkor frowned. Playback. The comms officer shook his head. There's nothing to play back, sir. The signal came from everywhere. Then it stopped. Cyril met the Admiral's gaze. Sir, what if we weren't meant to destroy it? Tor turned away, unwilling to entertain the thought. Then we will make sure the next one is meant to be destroyed. When the fleet returned to Varkos, the Dominion Council gathered in the Grand Chamber, a cathedral of glass and gravity suspensions that hung above the planet's atmosphere. The councilors, 7 in all, each representing a sector of the Dominion, regarded Tor with a mixture of amusement and disinterest. So, one of them drawled, his voice thick with mockery, the humans whisper through broken machines now? How poetic. They broke the accord first, another said. We did nothing wrong. They should be grateful we spare their homeworld. Laughter rippled through the chamber, echoing against the glass walls. Tor remained motionless. Their silence concerns me. They are not cowards. Something has changed. Changed, a counselor repeated, sneering. You give them too much credit, Admiral. They hide because they are weak. You mistake desperation for cunning. But Tor's thoughts drifted back to the human voice, the calm, unshaken tone that had followed the array's destruction. There had been no panic, no outrage, no emotion. Just acknowledgement. Later, alone in his private quarters aboard the Ardent Spear, he stood before the viewport once more. Varkos glowed beneath him, a jewel of artificial light, the Dominion's heart. Yet all he could see was the empty black beyond it, the silence that now felt alive. He activated a data feed, scrolling through intercepted human transmissions for months prior. Peace negotiations. Trade proposals. Then abruptly nothing. Total withdrawal. No reason given. Every channel closed at once. The humans had vanished from a political stage with unnerving precision. The silence was not absence. It was intent. He exhaled, feeling the weight of realization settle behind his composed exterior. His reflection in the glass looked older than it had that morning. Admiral's log, he said quietly. The humans are moving unseen. I don't know how or why, but the void feels watchful. Outside, the stars flickered. For a brief moment, it almost seemed they were blinking in response. Tor turned from the window, his voice barely above a whisper. If they withdrew from talks, what exactly are they preparing to say? In the dark, the hum of the ship deepened. Somewhere, far beyond known space, the pulse from the destroyed array continued its silent journey. And as it reached the outermost edge of human territory, an answer stirred. The Dominion didn't notice the shift yet, but the stars did. The light beyond Neptune was dim and restless, the kind of blue that swallowed stars whole. Inside the human command citadel Aegis 1, Admiral Helena Voss stood before a wall of holographic projections, each one a living constellation of war. Her reflection swam across the glass, a face carved by too many sleepless nights and the quiet ache of inevitability. Reports cascaded across her display. Alien fleet movements, Dominion chatter, coded transmissions dissected by artificial intelligence. None of it surprised her. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The destruction of the Erebus, 9 colony, the attack on the communications array, all predicted months ago. Even the phrase message receive had been scripted, its tone calibrated to sound spontaneous. Humanity's silence had been the bait, and the Vethari had swallowed it whole. Projection confirms their 3rd fleet is redeploying toward the inner rim, said Commander Imani Kale, her second-in-command. She was younger than Voss by 2 decades, her voice clipped, her posture sharp. They think they've crippled our relay network. Their analysts still assume we're fractured. Helena's lips curved faintly, not in amusement, but in resignation. Let them keep assuming. Assumptions are the most obedient soldiers. Imani exhaled, stepping closer. We've crossed a line, Helena. No contact, no diplomacy, not even false negotiation. The Council's silence is unsettling even for me. Helena turned from the screens, studying the younger woman. You're afraid of silence. I'm afraid of what fills it. A long pause. Beyond the glass, Neptune's shadow rolled like an enormous bruise across the dark. We've been talking for a century, Helena said softly. Every word, every treaty, every apology bought us nothing but slower extinction. So we stopped talking. Now we listen. Imani looked down, and when they realized we were listening all along. Then, Helena said, we show them what we heard. A low vibration ran through the floor as hidden engines hummed to life. Across the solar system, Unmanned stations that had been thought abandoned began transmitting again, not in public channels, but in narrow quantum bursts invisible to conventional sensors. The pulse from the destroyed array had been their signal, activating Project Oracle, a lattice of folded space observatories scattered across interstellar dark zones. For months, humanity had been mapping Dominion movements, decrypting their hierarchies, predicting their reactions. Helena watched one of the holograms expand, a wireframe of the Milky Way's outer arm, filled with red and blue motion vectors. Red for the Dominion, blue for Earth. The red trails twisted erratically, chasing ghosts. The blue lines did not move. They waited. She touched a point on the map where a small cluster of lights pulsed faintly. These are their next targets. Or they were. Decoys? Imani asked. Evacuated weeks ago. The data still broadcasts population heat signatures. Dominion reconnaissance will see life where there is none. The younger woman hesitated. You're turning our colonies into traps. Helena's gaze hardened. Into mirrors. Let them see themselves hunting phantoms. For a moment, silence filled the control chamber, thick, charged, almost holy. Around them, technicians moved with deliberate calm, their voices low, their hands steady. There was no cheering, no bravado. Just the heavy discipline of people who had stopped pretending this was about glory. A communications officer approached. Ma'am, Dominion Fleet Arden Spear has transmitted tactical logs to their capital. They've confirmed the destruction of the array. Good, Helena said. Then the second phase begins. The officer hesitated. We're not retaliating. Helena's reply was quiet, but it carried through the deck like a blade, sliding free. Retaliation is noise. We're past that. She walked toward the viewport, her hands clasped behind her back. Tell our observers to stand down from interference. The Dominion still believes we're hiding. Let them. Fear grows best in the dark. Imani studied her, troubled. Helena, you've turned war into theater. No, Helena said, eyes distant. They turned peace into a joke. I'm simply finishing the story. Hours later, deep in the Dominion's core systems, Admiral Tkor Vale stared at the report of his latest reconnaissance. Another human sector found empty. Another colony gone dark. The same eerie pattern. Perfect order, no signs of struggle. Power cores cold but intact. Satellites still transmitting. Only this time one of the satellites carried a message in his own language. We see you. The words repeated endlessly, transmitted in rhythmic pulses that matched a human heartbeat. When decoded, the file included archival footage from Earth's ancient wars, grainy images of trench battles, nuclear clouds, soldiers weeping beside burning cities. It ended with a single line of text, we remember everything we became to survive. Tor watched in silence, his composure fraying. Around him, the bridge crew avoided his gaze. The young Lieutenant Cyril stood frozen beside the console. Sir, he whispered, they're showing us their history. History? Tor murmured. No, Lieutenant. They're showing us warning labels. He dismissed the feed, but the sound of human screams, distant, recorded, lingered like smoke in the air. For the first time in his career, he understood what it meant to face an enemy who believed endurance was a form of vengeance. In the council chamber later that cycle, his attempts to sound the alarm were met with derision. They are posturing, the High Chancellor said. Primitive intimidation. Then explain how they predict our every movement, Tkor snapped. Explain the phantom colonies, the silent sectors, the false data trails. You think this is coincidence? The chamber filled with dismissive laughter. One counselor leaned forward, his translucent skin glimmering under the light. Perhaps, Admiral, you've grown too fond of their dramatics. Kor's fists tightened. I have grown fond of survival. His words went unanswered. The session adjourned in mock applause. When he returned to his quarters, he requested the war footage again. The humans' past unfolded before him. Endless violence, nations rising and falling, machines of death evolving until they reached the stars. There was no beauty in it, only relentless adaptation. And suddenly, he understood the pattern. Every time humanity had been pushed to extinction, they hadn't died, they'd transformed. They learn, he whispered. They always learn. Far across the void, on Aegis 1, Helena Voss stood alone in the observation dome. The stars shimmered faintly through the station's polarized glass. She raised a hand to her communicator and murmured, "Initiate mirror protocol. Let them see what silence can do." From Neptune's orbit to the outer colonies, every hidden human relay came alive. In the Dominion's databases, entire fleets appeared to exist where there were none. Communications scrambled. Sensor ghosts multiplied. In that moment, as the Vethari Dominion's vast empire filled with confusion, Helena closed her eyes. She could almost hear the collective gasp echoing through the galaxy. When she spoke, it was barely a whisper. You thought silence meant surrender. You never realized it was strategy. Outside, the stars flickered once more. Somewhere, deep within the Dominion, Admiral Tor looked up at that summit. The humans hadn't vanished at all. They were watching, waiting, and the silence was just beginning to speak. The Dominion fleets no longer moved with confidence. Their formations, once proud and seamless, now fractured like cracked glass across the void. Entire supply routes blinked out of existence, wormhole gates misaligned, coordinates altered, navigation data rewritten mid-transit. Admirals barked orders into empty channels that looped back their own voices, distorted and delayed. The maps that had once charted their dominion now pulsed with false lights, phantoms drawn by human design. Admiral Tkor Vale sat motionless in his command chamber, surrounded by flickering projections. The Dominion's great empire, centuries old, was dissolving in silence. Reports arrived in waves, stations reporting false coordinates, ships vanishing into miscalculated jumps, sectors claiming to have been infiltrated by invisible fleets. Each message was stamped with the same transmission signature, human interference detected. Yet there were no fleets, no invasions, only quiet correction. He leaned back, the metallic ridges along his jaw catching the light of the failing monitors. "Show me the source," he demanded. His chief analyst, a gaunt creature named Relith, hesitated. "There is no single source, Admiral. The corruption originates simultaneously across multiple systems. Each one corrects the next, like mirrors reflecting mirrors." Torres' claws flexed slowly. "Then they've built a system that thinks. Or something that remembers," Relith murmured. Their silence wasn't retreat, it was computation. The realization settled like ash. The humans had vanished from the diplomatic channels to think, not to hide. Their withdrawal was a strategy of consolidation, a quiet reorganization behind the mask of isolation. They had transformed every treaty delay, every failed negotiation into time. "Admiral," said a junior officer, voice trembling, "Dominion Central Command demands a full report. They believe your fleet has lost control of the outer sectors." Kor gave a hollow laugh. "Lost control? Control implies something still listens." He gestured toward the holograms. "They're listening now, Lieutenant. Just not to us." The bridge lights dimmed as power was rerouted. The Dominion's Central Intelligence Network, the Crown Array, was struggling to maintain coherence. Entire nodes were rewriting themselves. On one screen, a human insignia flickered briefly before dissolving into static. Torres' gaze hardened. "What do we know of their command structure? Names, faces, anything?" Relith brought up a series of fragmented dossiers, blurred images, incomplete records. One name appeared consistently, Admiral Helena Voss. A woman with eyes like obsidian, described by captured spies as methodical, emotionless, and impossibly patient. "She leads them," Relith said, "or at least commands their movements." Tor studied her image. The human's expression was calm, her gaze fixed directly into the lens as though she had known someone would eventually look back. "Emotionless," he repeated. "No, that's not absence of emotion, that's control. The kind that survives extinction." He closed the file. "Find out how she's doing this. If we don't understand her methods, the Dominion ends before she ever fires a weapon." Across the gulf of space, Helena Voss stood aboard the Aegis One, her own projections dancing before her in ordered chaos. Every Dominion fleet movement was mapped, every command intercepted. The AI network, the Dominion Mirror, had begun rewriting their logistics autonomously, feeding back false data until the Empire's systems collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. Her officers waited for orders, but Helena said nothing. She watched as another red sector blinked into blue on the projection. Another victory, silent and bloodless. Commander Imani Kale broke the quiet. "You've turned their own empire against itself. They'll never recover from this." Helena didn't respond immediately. "We didn't destroy them, Imani. We reminded them how fragile they already were." "You sound almost sorry for them." "I am," Helena said softly. "But pity doesn't undo what they've done. It only makes us hesitate." Imani folded her arms. And hesitation costs lives. A flicker of regret passed through Helena's expression. Yes. And sometimes it saves souls. The difference is timing. An alert tone sounded. One of the projections shifted, an encrypted Dominion broadcast breaking through human filters. Torres' voice filled the chamber, distorted but clear enough. To whoever listens in the dark, your silence has weight. It bends empires. But silence cannot govern the void forever. Sooner or later, you must speak. And when you do, we will be listening. Helena stood still, absorbing the message. There was no mockery in his tone, no arrogance. Only something that sounded dangerously close to respect. Do we respond? Imani asked. No, Helena said. He's not asking for an answer. He's reminding himself that we exist. The channel closed. For a moment, the hum of the command deck was the only sound. Helena exhaled slowly, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the exhaustion underneath. He's beginning to understand. Does that make him dangerous? It makes him human, Helena replied, and for the first time, her voice carried something almost tender. Back within the Dominion capital, chaos had turned to panic. The High Council screamed at one another across fractured hololinks. Some demanded a counteroffensive, others proposed surrender. None could agree, and the Empire's communication lattice disintegrated with their arguments. Tor stood apart from them, silent as the chamber lights flickered. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to reassert dominance, but instinct was the very flaw the humans had learned to weaponize. They had waited, listened, and then struck with precision so absolute it felt divine. When the council finally dismissed him, their voices hollow and desperate, he walked the long corridor to his private observatory. The stars outside no longer seemed steady. They pulsed faintly, as though whispering to one another. He activated the human footage again. Earth's wars, their cities rebuilt from ash, their endless cycle of destruction and renewal. The pattern was unmistakable, adaptation as a creed. He whispered into the empty room, "You don't evolve despite conflict. You evolve because of it." For a moment, he imagined Helena Voss somewhere out there, watching him through unseen eyes, both of them trapped in the same unspoken understanding. One species learning fear for the first time, the other rediscovering it after generations of denial. He turned toward the stars, his voice barely audible. "We thought your silence was surrender. It was the sound of you remembering who you are." Beyond the capital's orbit, faint ripples began to distort the void, wormholes opening with surgical precision. The Dominion's final illusions were about to collapse. Tor didn't move. He simply watched the first light appear and whispered a single word meant for no one but himself. "Begin." The stars above Kyrath shimmered as if holding their breath, millions of points of light suspended in a silence too deliberate to be natural. The Vedhari Dominion's last fleet formed a defensive ring around their capital world, thousands of warships positioned with mathematical precision, engines glowing, weapons primed. Admiral Tkor Vale stood at the center of the command nexus, his face carved with resolve and exhaustion. He had spent his life enforcing dominance, his victories written in blood across the stars. But now, as he gazed into the void before him, he understood that everything he knew about war had already been rewritten by a species that refused to explain itself. "Report," he ordered quietly. "Enemy fleets sighted, sir. Multiple wormhole signatures everywhere." The words came out trembling, and for good reason. On the vast screen, the space around Kyrath fractured like cracked glass. Wormholes bloomed silently, their edges glowing a pale blue. No sound, no shockwaves, just a serene rippling in the void. From each one emerged human ships, small, sleek, efficient, appearing not as an invading armada, but as precision instruments. They didn't fan out or broadcast warnings. They simply existed, perfectly positioned, as if the universe had been rearranged to accommodate them. Tor felt his throat tighten. "They didn't travel," he murmured. "They arrived." Across the void, the Aegis One glided into position. On its command bridge, Admiral Helena Voss stood alone before the viewport, her expression unreadable. The human fleet moved in perfect synchrony, each vessel linked through the Dominion mirror's neural lattice. Her officers waited for orders, but she gave none. The silence itself was her command. Every maneuver had been calculated months before. The battle unfolding now was simply execution. Imani Kale approached, voice low. "Helena, the Dominion fleet isn't firing. They're waiting." "Then they've learned something," Helena replied. "That's progress. Do we strike?" Helena didn't answer immediately. Her gaze drifted toward the image of Kyrath below, its surface glittering with the lights of billions of lives. No, we don't strike first. We never needed to. Imani frowned. They destroyed our colonies. They started this. They started it, Helena said softly, but if we end it with fire, then we become them. Her hand hovered over the console, and her voice changed, low, commanding, absolute. Initiate blackout sequence. Full saturation. Show them what silence truly means. Within seconds, every human ship transmitted a single, invisible pulse. Across the Dominion network, lights dimmed, systems faltered, and communications died. The entire Vedhari defense grid went dark. Command vessels lost guidance, drones shut down mid-orbit, and targeting systems began feeding false coordinates. Ships that fired missed entirely, their plasma bolts curving harmlessly into the void. From the ground, the citizens of Kyrath saw the stars flicker, one by one, and then vanish behind a curtain of unnatural night. On the Ardent Spear, alarms screamed as Tkor's crew scrambled to regain control. All systems unresponsive, shouted Relith. Navigation locked. We've lost contact with the Council. Tkor's voice cut through the chaos, low but steady. They're not destroying us. They're dismantling us. He turned toward the viewport, where the human fleet hovered in stillness. This is not conquest, it's correction. His comms officer spoke up suddenly. Admiral, incoming transmission, human origin. The voice that followed filled the bridge, smooth and steady, like an echo carried across the centuries. This is Admiral Helena Voss of Earth Command. Negotiations are concluded. All Dominion forces will stand down immediately. Any resistance will be interpreted as refusal of surrender. Kor straightened, eyes narrowing. You believe this is mercy, he said aloud, though the transmission couldn't hear him. You've unmade an empire. But Helena's voice continued, unshaken. We came for peace. You mistook that for weakness. The silence you mock was discipline. We will not destroy you, Admiral. We will leave you room to understand what peace costs. Then the channel closed. The command deck was still. Outside, the once mighty Dominion armada floated powerless, their reactors cold, their comms silent. Not a single human ship had fired a weapon. Tkor felt the weight of history press down on him. His species had ruled through arrogance, believing control to be the same as order. But humanity had found something deeper, a kind of ruthless serenity that didn't need destruction to prove its dominance. He turned to Serral, who stood pale and motionless. Remember this, Tkor said quietly. When civilization stops explaining itself, it is no longer asking to be understood. It is preparing to redefine the universe. Far away, on Aegis 1, Helena watched as her systems confirmed the Dominion's surrender. Reports streamed in, planetary shields offline, fleets disarmed, resistance negligible. There were no cheers on the human bridge, no celebration. Just the steady hum of systems returning to standby. Imani exhaled slowly. It's over. Helena's gaze remained fixed on the stars. Nothing that changes everything is ever over. The human fleets began to withdraw, wormholes blooming open once more, their blue light washing over the darkened Dominion ships. For every world they passed, they left behind stability protocols, reconstruction algorithms, and medical assistance packages. Humanity did not occupy, they reorganized. Hours later, Helena received a private transmission request from Tkor himself. Against her staff's objections, she accepted. His image appeared on the screen, his once imposing form dimmed by exhaustion. You could have finished us, he said simply. Helena regarded him with calm detachment. We did finish you, Admiral. Just not the way you expected. He gave a slow nod. And now you live. You remember. And maybe, if you're capable, you learn. He hesitated, then said quietly, perhaps silence is not weakness after all. For the first time in days, Helena allowed a faint smile. No, it's patience. The transmission ended. In the hours that followed, humanity's fleets began their withdrawal from Kyrath's orbit. They moved with quiet precision, leaving only the faint ripples of displaced starlight in their wake. No banners, no triumph, only purpose. Helena lingered on the command bridge long after the others had left. She watched the darkened Dominion planet fade into the distance, her reflection superimposed over its dying light. Imani approached one last time. What now? Helena's voice was quiet, almost reverent. Now we listen again. The galaxy's changed. It's awake. She turned away, her silhouette framed against the vastness of space. Outside, the stars began to shimmer once more, brighter, sharper, as if newly aware of the silence between them. Somewhere deep within that silence, Tkor stood beneath a sky no longer his to command, staring up at those same stars. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a conqueror or a defender. He simply felt small and free. Helena's final thought drifted across the command deck like a whisper. We wanted peace. But peace demanded silence first. As the human fleets disappeared into the void, the stars seemed to tremble, no longer from fear, but from anticipation. The war had ended not with fire, but with understanding. And somewhere, in the vast stillness between worlds, the galaxy exhaled.